Hello there, and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. Well, as the Idaho Legislature is slowly drawing to a close, I think they want to have business wrapped up by the end of this week. There's a lot of unfinished business. And so I didn't know whether we should title this episode, The Unfinished Business of the Legislature or What Could Have Been. There have been some high points, and there have a few things we're going to celebrate that have been accomplished, but there's a lot of work that for some reason isn't being done. And we're going to examine that in just a few moments.
All reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I know that when the legislature's in session, there's a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of bills that to come along, and let's face it, for a lot of us, it's hard to keep track of everything simply because there's so much going on that unless you are just a diehard political junkie and you are following every single move and every single bill, it's easy to lose track or worse, to simply just trust the legislature to, they'll take care of it. That's what we elect them for. Well, thankfully, there are people who are like that. And there's also the Idaho Freedom Foundation, which keeps tabs on these bills, runs them through the Freedom Index to see how do they affect freedom? Do they negatively impact it by increasing the size and cost and scope and intrusiveness of government? Or do they reduce its intrusiveness and cost and size and scope? And does it become more responsive to us? So we have kind of a mixed bag today. I want to start on a high point. We'll start with some of the things that are going right, and a couple of bills worth celebrating. The Senate amended House Bill 96, which allows for unifying and patriotic flags to fly on government buildings. This would mean in schools as well. It's passed the Senate in a 20-11 vote. Now it returns to the House. This would prevent local governments from flying woke, ideological, and divisive flags. I know, we never thought we would be in this position, but here we are. This isn't a matter of, those conservatives out there trying to spoil everybody's fun, so much as a matter of, can we get government back to the idea of representing everybody instead of trying to push a particular woke agenda? So we'll see where that one goes. Again, that the hours are going quickly. Here's one that did pass and was signed into law. Josh Tanner, who's a representative, actually pointed this out yesterday. S 1027 was signed into law. This means the big bank cartels have no power here in discriminating against conservative residents. That's now a financial relic. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there have been instances in which big banks, and sometimes even not so big banks, have, for one reason or another, sometimes they won't even say, it's just, well, this is our decision or this is our policy, and we don't have to explain ourselves, but they'll cut people off from the banking system. And we saw this somewhat during the COVID lockdowns. We've seen it a little bit since with the woke cancel culture, DEI kind of stuff. It still goes on. And it's typically conservative businesses or individuals who find themselves debanked for whatever reason. They're on the wrong side of the people who want to pull those levers of social control. This prohibits banks from exercising that kind of power in Idaho. So thank you for standing up. I know there are those, well, you're telling a private business, what they're going to, well, if they're going to do that, they need to be able to explain themselves. Here's another one. This is the missed opportunity. We'll start here. The launch program in Idaho, which is largely, it's rent seeking for various industries that are closely connected to the governor and members of the legislature, particularly the leadership. And I'm sorry if that sounds cynical, but that's what this is. It's taxpayer dollars being used to favor various industries by pushing young people fresh out of high school into those particular industries. Well, Matt Edwards points out he went and sorted Idaho's most in-demand careers by highest demand from the launch program. And this was from the actual website, Next Steps Idaho. And it was kind of surprising to see that massage therapist was number one as far as the highest demand occupations, followed by a PR rep. He says, this is a joke. You got thousands of illegals working in the dairy industry. Seems like that should be the first priority. I wanted to show you kind of a close-up of some of the things. These are the top tier ones: massage therapists, public relations specialists, conservation scientists, veterinary technologists, and technicians. Now that one, I think we could probably get behind. Nurse practitioners, again, veterinarians. There's one more slide here. Again, these are showing the top in-demand positions: physician's assistants, biological technicians, physical therapist assistants, healthcare social workers, zoologists and wildlife biologists, mental health and substance abuse social workers. Isn't it interesting how many of those correspond with government at some level? Again, it's like government is kind of picking and choosing winners and losers as opposed to the free market, pushing people toward those things that are most in demand. But never mind, that's one of those opportunities that's been missed thus far. I don't know if it's going to happen in this legislative session. Probably not. Here's another one, and this one, House Bill 135 was simply about welfare benefits or public benefits, again, on the taxpayer's dime, for people who are here without legal permission. In other words, illegal aliens should not be receiving those benefits. Now, we can argue that, well, there's too many people who are homegrown, American citizens who abuse those benefits. And I would say, yes, that can also be the case. But especially if a person isn't even here legally, why should they be entitled to access to taxpayer-funded benefits and welfare benefits? So H-135 would have addressed this, but Senate Majority Leader Anthony received a letter, and this is the letter. It was from the WIC Association. If you're familiar with women, infants, children, this is a welfare organization, and look, we can say it probably does some good things, but it also seems very misguided in that it's saying, we're writing to strenuously oppose H-135 because it's going to leave all of these people, destitute. Now, they're not even talking about illegals. They're talking about, homegrown Americans that are going to be left destitute if H-135 were to pass. And strangely enough, now the momentum has gone out. 135 was slated for a hearing earlier this week, but now it's been delayed for 3 days, and it's at the bottom of the Senate reading calendar. This goes to show you that there are lobbyists, even within government, that will sometimes fight against anything to turn back or to pare down the size and scope of government. By the way, I appreciated the response that the Idaho Freedom Foundation had to this particular letter. They said, today the vote on HB 135 to stop welfare for illegals was delayed. This was after we heard it would be brought to the floor for a vote on Monday. Well, we just found out this afternoon that it might be due to a letter from the National WIC Association. The letter slams HB 135, complaining that immigrant families will suffer, leans on flimsy claims of big savings, and warns of doomed U.S. citizen kids, all without solid proof. Ignoring taxpayer priorities, it screeches about health disasters while dodging the bill's logic. And that's very true. It's high on emotion, but rather short on facts. And the idea here is, by what moral standard do people who are not here legally have an entitled claim to the taxpayers' dollars? This is about prioritizing. If those dollars are going to be spent, they should be going to citizens first, not to people who are here illegally. So is this letter the reason that the Senate's delaying a vote on the most common sense bill that we've seen all session? Now, there are a number of other bills that are also being delayed. I mentioned this in the last episode, the chairman's drawer. I would encourage you, go to the Idaho Freedom Foundation website, idahofreedom.org/chairman's-drawer, and you will see a long list of bills that are being delayed for one reason or another. I want to tip my hat to Brian Allman with the Gem State Substack for compiling a nice list of about 8 of them that he felt were especially high priorities. I'm going to highlight just a handful of those. And I liked Brian's explanation, just so it's not that we're trying to pick on the committee chairman, but you need to understand that sometimes this is how people can circumvent or torpedo legislation without actually giving it a fair shake of allowing the legislative process to either pass it or fail it on its merits. Brian says, while committee chairs must exercise discretion in which bills they put on each day's agenda, in some cases they face pressure from committee members, other legislators, lobbyists, or special interests to ensure that certain bills never see the light of day. So here are a few important bills stuck in committee that deserve full hearings with pre-written email links for your convenience. You can check this out for yourself at his Gem State Substack. House Bill 98. This is one that passed the House 40-29 with one abstention, but has yet to receive a hearing in Senate State Affairs, that is. And the Idaho Education Association obviously is against this bill, which would prevent taxpayers from subsidizing teacher union activity through things like paid time off to do union activities or automatic payroll deduction of union dues. And you're urged to contact Chairman Jim Guthrie and ask him to give that bill a full hearing. Here's another one. House Bill 252. This is a big one because, again, this deals with illegal immigration. E-Verify. Federal law says illegal aliens are not allowed to work in our country. However, many businesses ignore this law because it gives them a constant source of cheap labor, and enforcement is basically nil. So the lobbyist for the Idaho Dairymen's Association said up to 70% of their employees could potentially be illegal. H-252 would require employers to use the existing federal E-Verify system to ensure that they're only hiring citizens or those with valid work permits. For some reason, this is, again, relegated to the netherworld where hopefully in the minds of those trying to stop it, it will just die a quiet death when the time runs out on this legislative session. So you're urged to contact Chairman Brent Crane of the House State Affairs and ask him to give this bill a full hearing. And again, if you go to the Gem State Substack, Brian has the email link provided there. This is an important one too, and this is the one that I'm going to end on. It's Senate Bill 1023, medical freedom. It's passed the legislature. It is now sitting and awaiting Governor Brad Little's signature. For some reason, the governor seems a little bit reluctant to sign this, and maybe that's a guilty conscience because he did not perform especially well when it came to resisting the urge to succumb to the fears of, oh, we've got to do something, even if it's the wrong thing during COVID. So while you're contacting committee chairs, Brian says, take the time to email the governor's office or leave a voicemail at this number asking him to sign this important piece of legislation. He says, we must never again allow government to run roughshod over our constitutional rights the way it did in 2020 and 2021. I wholeheartedly agree. We should have learned a lesson. And look, it's understandable that some people in positions of authority don't really want to admit, hey, we were wrong about that, sorry, because they don't want to face accountability. But this bill, now that it's been passed by the legislature, needs to be signed by the governor. Maybe it will just go into law without his signature. But if he really wants to show us that he's not willing to do it all to us again, it would be a gesture of good faith for him to go ahead and sign it and recognize, look, we can be forgiving, but you need to understand you were wrong, and we don't want anybody doing this again. We really need to claim that medical freedom. And hopefully that lesson hasn't been lost on too many people. Well, there you have it. Some of the unfinished business and what could have been for the Idaho Legislature. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
All reporters are biased. The Idaho Press Club are biased. All media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy.